webinar. How exciting. It is lovely to see everyone here today. I've just literally taken delivery of my ice bath. So I'm looking at my ice bath. I didn't tell you about that, Sam. I've just taken delivery of a massive ice bath. So it's sitting in the garden for later potentially. It's lovely to see everybody join us today at lunchtime. We love doing these lunch and learns, and we love doing them with Sam because he's brilliant. Sam from FounderCatalyst. We always get a really good turnout to these, and they're always very, very valuable and knowledgeable. So we're going to get cracking soon. But before we do, let's just make sure everyone can say hi in the chat. So enable Q&A. So Q&A is at the bottom. So if you've got a question, you're going to put it in the Q&A, which you should be able to find at the bottom if you hover over the bottom. And let's have a look in the chat. Oh, brilliant. We can say hi. So pop in the chat what your name is, what your business is. We'd love to also know what stage your business is at, because this is kind of like everything from having a bright idea to getting fully funded. So what stage are you at? Are you at idea stage? Have you got customers? Have you done funding? Are you looking for funding? Building an MVP? Great. So Jade is building an MVP at the moment. So let us know in the chat what your business is, what you're building, what stage you're at, and anything else that you want to share. We've got 250 people registered for today. I don't think we'll get everybody live. We normally have about half of those people join us live. So Alan's looking for investment. Lottie's working on her pitch deck, and Sunny is building a prototype. Lots of MVPs in here. A couple of people just launched, building MVPs. Cool. So when we went to our London Business School event, I remember the lecturer saying, basically a business is an ever evolving MVP. You've never done it. It's just constant. You're always tweaking, testing, improving. So it's an ongoing MVP. And somebody's here with an idea. I love that, Anna. Great that you turned up with an idea. And hopefully at the end of this session, you're going to have clarity on how to get that idea from an idea into a business, into growing a successful business, and also getting funded if you need it. Sam, whilst we wait for everybody to arrive, oh, Anna's saying that's exactly what she needs. Perfect. Would you like to do just a quick introduction? Or do you want to do that in your slides? Have you got that in your slides?
I've got a couple of slides on this. I'm more intrigued by asking a question on the ice bath. So,
sorry, yes.
Tell us more about this ice bath. Yeah.
The ice bath. Okay. The ice bath. Well, I haven't actually decided if I'm going to put ice in it. It's basically a mega steel bar that is going to be part paddling pool for the children, which Axel's very excited about. It's going to be like an outside bath for me, which is going to be cold, but I'm not sure about whether I'm going to put ice in it at the moment. And my plan is that if I go in it every day, by the time it gets to November or December, I'll be accustomed to it being freezing cold. Anyone else got an ice bath or like cold water therapy? Pop it in the chat. Apparently it's really good for your mental health as well. I've done a little bit of it. So yes. Oh, Jade's saying she loves cold water swimming. Yeah.
I've got a log-fired hot tub, but I don't think that counts in the same league, does it? I always, yeah, it's always at 40 degrees.
I'm going to take some photos of my new mega ice bath. So cold shower when overwhelmed is great. Exactly. I'm trying to have Karen is saying turn the cold shower to cold for 2 minutes. Exactly. I try and do that at the end of my shower, at least 40 seconds of a cold shower. So we are going to talk about more things than cold water therapy today. But whilst we were just letting everyone arrive, there's no harm in covering that off. So I think it looks like we've got people at all stages of business. From just got an idea to businesses running, you've got some traction, to the point that you want to get investment. And we are going to be covering all those topics today. So we're going to do a whistle-stop tour of everything you need to know from a kind of like legal company admin, I suppose, perspective on that journey. And also, so Sam's going to host that. I've also am an exit founder, run multiple businesses, raise investment, sold businesses, merge businesses, and invest in businesses. So I can probably add in a few little bits along the way. So Q&A, questions go in the Q&A. So Mark, if you put your chat in the chat, which is different to the Q&A. So if you've got any questions for Sam, pop them in the Q&A and we'll answer those as we go through at the end. And if you want to chat along with what we're talking or sharing your thoughts about what's going on in your business or anything, pop that in the chat, because we like to see chat going on. Need investment, but no idea where to start. Don't worry, Silver. We're going to cover that off. And also, Sam and I were just talking. We've done multiple other masterclasses, which are recording. One on SEO, getting SEIS and EIS. One on nailing your valuation, and one on legal fundamentals. Is that right?
So?
Yeah. So we've done all those. We'll share those afterwards. We'll make sure that you have access to those. Sam, should we get cracking, because it's 1:05?
Yes.
And we've got a lot to cover off.
Lovely. Well, I'm going to share as always, I'm going to put my slides up first, because otherwise I'll forget, and that is always embarrassing. So, hello everybody. Great to see you here today. And I can't believe, Emmy, this is our 4th session already, which is...
I know. We love doing sessions together because we have fun, and also I like doing it because I know that it's mega valuable to the audience. So I'm going to let you get on.
It's great fun. The first we covered SEIS, EIS in mind-numbing detail. We'll share links to the videos of all of these. We've got those on these all on our website. If you want to know everything about SEIS, EIS, then go see that video. The second we covered legals, so funding round legals, everything from the term sheet through to the shareholder agreement articles and what you do post completion of your funding round. The third, it was a bit of a smorgasbord, that one. We how to find investors, how to persuade them you're the right company to invest in, and how to close your funding round. And this one we're talking about is the journey from bright idea to fully funded. And the reason why and this kind of draws together the previous presentations. And the reason we've done this, we hear from loads of first-time founders who are facing doing their first funding round. And they're like, I just don't understand where to start. I don't understand the process. It's all opaque and confusing. And I can understand that. So before I started as an angel investor, I'll give you a bit of background in a minute. You know, I kind of looked in as an investor. I went, geez, where do I start with this? It's just ridiculous. It's confusing. I don't understand the process. But actually, when you spend some time in the ecosystem, you realize that it is such a ridiculously well-trodden path. So every founder on this call probably is going through exactly the same journey. They are going from, and I'll talk through in 6 steps in a minute, but they're going through exactly the same journey. So this presentation today is meant to demystify each of those 6 steps from bright idea to fully funded, and that's it. So I've got something like 30 odd slides here. I'm going to really canter through each of the slides quickly, because the best part of all of the Female Founder Rise sessions is the Q&A at the end. So without further ado, let's get to it. So rather than a written agenda, we've got this little roadmap, but these are the things we're going to cover today. So first, I'm going to do a quick intro on myself and FounderCatalyst. Then we will cover what you do in each of these steps. So from pre-incorporation, what do you need to do there? Incorporation, preparing for funding, going to market, closing your funding round, and then what do you do post-raise? What I'm not going to cover here is what some of you are probably most excited about, maybe, but we won't be talking about your idea, your product, the go-to-market, how to sell this is all the funding round and legal journey. We're assuming you've already got a great idea and some idea of how to develop the product and how you'll take it to market. If not, there are loads of really great ways of getting support there. That's not what we're going to cover. We're just going to cover the legal stuff.
Sam, sorry, just very quickly interrupt you, but someone's asking about getting access to this deck. I suppose if people email you afterwards, you'll be able to send it through to them.
Yeah, for sure. We'll share it afterwards. No problem. Yeah. And then finally, we'll jump on to Q&A, which is, for me, the fun bit. So let's go to some introductions. Well, my introduction specifically, I guess. By way of intro, I'm an exited founder. So you can see here, my career was 15 years in corporate world, doing interesting stuff as an engineer, director of project services. When that business collapsed in a heap, spoiler alert, I was director of project services, had about 130 employees, 230 million of projects under me. So that was all good stuff. I've already told you the spoiler. In January 2013, that business disappeared overnight, which was exciting. So I started my own company as an accidental entrepreneur. We grew that from 0 to about 30 million in 4 years. And then I exited to private equity, which was great fun. I fell in love with the SEIS and EIS tax relief scheme because I invested in my own business under that scheme. And that genuinely saved me millions of pounds in capital gains tax. So yeah, big fan of that scheme. The next day, pretty much, I started angel investing after I exited. And over the last 6.5 years, I've got 32 investments, about $750,000 deployed. And I kept bumping into loads of founders who had really bright ideas. They knew they needed funding to achieve their dreams, but had no idea on the next steps. And I guess today's presentation is the distillation of my kind of thoughts on how a founder should approach that process over the last 6.5 years since I started angel investing. To solve this problem, I started a company called FounderCatalyst. We do a few things. We offer a whole bunch of free stuff on our website. I'll send you guys a link to that in the chat. We help people get SEIS, EIS, Advanced Assurance. So we've got a ridiculously good track record, 100% success over the last 3 years. We don't charge for that. We do it for free when you commit to a funding round. We take the heavy lifting and do the submission for you. The third thing we do is legal funding round paperwork. So we produce every legal document you need in order to close a funding round. We've got a data room for your interaction with investors, online signing, and all of those kind of things. So we take the hard work and the guesswork out of legal paperwork, and then we do introductions between our customers and potential sources of funding. So that's our 2 things that make us unique. Firstly, we're commercially unique. Everything we do is £1,500. There's no monthly fees, no hidden fees, no percentage of your raise. One of our customers raised £2.7 million last month, and our fee for them was 1,500 quid. Any other way of doing that funding round in the UK would have cost them 8 times the amount. And secondly, you get to work with me and the team of exited founders and angel investors. Right. Enough of that, onto the content. So the first thing I would urge you to do, and this is step 1 on the process, which is what do you do pre-incorporation? The Japanese have a wonderful phrase for this, and it's called, I'm going to butcher the Japanese expression for this, but ikagi, which is making sure that you are doing something you're passionate about, what you love, what the world needs, what you get paid for, and what you're good at. Because working hard for something you don't care about is called stress, and working hard for something you love is called passion. So, I'm 3 or 4 years now into FounderCatalyst, and I am incredibly passionate about what we do. And I think if I didn't have any one of these 4 items, I'd have quit and said, God, I don't need to do this. I'm going to go and enjoy my, we were just talking about hot tub in the garden. I'm going to go and enjoy my hot tub in the garden much more. But actually, I'm really passionate. I fundamentally, believe in helping every founder to achieve their funding goals if they so wish. So do double check that you really, really care that your startup ticks these 4 boxes. So away from the nice fluffy stuff, let's talk about the real stuff you need to do before you incorporate your business. So the really, really hard part, and I've incorporated quite a few businesses now over the years, the really hard part, and it sounds ridiculous when I say it, but it's picking a name. It's getting you and your co-founders to agree that a name is, both snappy and you love it. You can get the domains that you need, and also you're not infringing on somebody else's trademark. So this is, it will take you weeks probably. There'll be lots of go around. Somebody will really love a name, and the other founding team will go, oh, that's tragic. And then the onus is on them to find something better, and round in circles it goes. There are some really good resources to help here. So, and I'll share the deck with the links, but GoDaddy's got a really great site. If you can give it some hints on some names, it will come up with some domains that are available, which is really, really useful. And also there's a page on .gov.uk which will help you search for existing trademarks, so you can check that your name doesn't infringe on somebody else's trademark. So picking a name is always disproportionately painful compared to what you think it is. The next hardest part is picking a logo. Honestly, it's that took just as much time, I think, for FounderCatalyst as picking the name. We ended up using a site called 99 Designs. There are lots of Fiverr and other places like this that do it these days. But 99 Designs, you can give your spec and color schemes and any hints to the designer on what you want. You tell them your name, and they'll go. People will. Maybe 50 people or whatever will come up with designs, and you can work with a number of those designers to get it to the point where you love the logo, and then you pay for it. It's not cheap, but it is a way of getting a logo that you fall in love with. You should be considering pre-incorporation your IP position. So specifically, you should be thinking about what trademarks you can register. So when you pick a name, make sure you register the name sooner rather than later, rather than incorporating. There are trolls out there who look for incorporated companies, and they will register a trademark before you can if you've incorporated. So you probably want to get that ball rolling to start. And you want to think about, any other IP, such as patents, that will be involved in the business. Now, the next part, which is often neglected by founders, is coming up with that founder collaboration agreement. What's a founder collaboration agreement? It's a document between each of the co-founders to agree some really basic principles. And those 3 principles are who's putting what in, who gets what out, and what is the company going to do? The basic, what's the mission, what's the vision, how are we going to get funded, those kind of things. Let's walk through those in step. So the first is around who's contributing what, and this can be a mixture. Some people will be contributing money. Maybe you're putting £5,000 into to get the company set up, to do some basic legals and design a logo and that kind of stuff. That should be documenting who's putting in and what, and is it as a are you buying equity for the £5,000, or are you doing it as a director's loan or whatever? Are you putting time in? So lots of founders work for free for a period of time until they get funded and can pay themselves. So who's contributing, who's full-time, who's part-time, who's only weekends, whatever happens to be, and what IP is each of the founders bringing to the table and contributing to the business. And even if somebody has something that the business is using and they're not contributing it, that should be well defined as well, so everybody is on the same page around the IP position. And then you document what each team member receives in terms of who gets what equity, what percentage. If you've got 4 co-founders, you might have 25% each, or somebody may always just be 1 day a week, so you say, well, we're all having 30% each, and John can have 10%, or whatever it happens to be. Agreeing what salary, and there'll be probably 2 aspects to this: the salary that founders get before funding's in, and then the salary that founders get in once that funding's in. And who's a director? Sometimes people don't want to be statutory directors, or can't be to start, but can be after 6 months or whatever. All of that should be documented. And then, the other stuff is much more woolly. It's around, what does the business do? What's our strategy? Where are we going to get funding? Any other material changes you think that need documenting. So you've got alignment at the start, but that alignment drifts over time. The founder collaboration agreement is a place to make sure you've documented that. So that's the stuff you can do pre-incorporation. Usually people get together, they have months in order to do this. There's no rush to do this stuff. Then you come to step 2, which is around incorporating your business. Sorry, apologies in advance for this slide. It is truly ugly. But yeah, so the first thing you do is formally incorporate. That is really, really straightforward. It costs, there are dozens of companies that do it in the UK. It costs £50 company house fee plus a fee in order to do it. These fees are very competitive, so you shouldn't be paying much more than £60 or £70 overall. Before you incorporate, there are ways in which founders can make use of SEIS and EIS themselves. And I say that in good knowledge because I did it myself. It saved me millions in CGT. It is well worth you considering whether you and your co-founders can make use of SEIS before you incorporate. Once you've incorporated, that ship sailed, it's too late. But if there's anybody on this call who hasn't incorporated, let's book a call and let's walk through your scenario, because it may be you can make use of SEIS. That may feel like a big admin burden. God, it's more paperwork and it's going to cost me another £1,000 but you're building what you hope is going to be an amazing startup that will have a massive exit value, and therefore paying that £1,000 could save you a huge amount of money. If you don't think your startup's going to be a huge success, then maybe reconsider what you're doing, because there's probably a better use of your time. So yeah, I would urge every founder that hasn't incorporated to just sanity check whether they can make use of SEIS themselves. We see lots of mistakes with incorporating, and the motto, keep it simple, is absolutely key here. It makes sense to incorporate with 100,000 shares across you and your co-founders. So if there's 4 of you, 25,000 shares each or whatever, with a nominal value of something like 0.001. That makes the maths all work out neatly, and it means you're not having to do a share split before you do a funding round. And also best practice is just to create ordinary shares. So don't overcomplicate things if you can avoid it with 5 different share classes and alphabet shares and That stuff will almost certainly be irrelevant. Just keep it simple with ordinary shares. And ditto, you see lots of founders going, right, I'm going to create a parent company and 3 subsidiaries and Sometimes there's a really good reason to do that kind of stuff, and you should seek a lawyer's advice. But generally, it's just not worth doing. You should just have one parent company with all founders, all shareholders, and that's your trading business. If you need to change it in time, then you can create a subsidiary or whatever. But when you're formally incorporating up front, it makes life much easier just to have one top co, and that's it. Once you've formally incorporated, you've got to think about all the other stuff on the right. And this is where this presentation straying off of just the funding path. But these are the other things that, you know, it's easy to forget about in the excitement of incorporation.
I was just going to say very quickly to give you a tiny little break, because I know you've been talking for ages, but I would say someone in here was saying, are we going to cover funding and stuff? And we are. But my experience from working as a consultant with founders is most founders haven't done a lot of these things that we're covering off now. Like, so many people are not registered with the ICO for data protection. Like, most people have never heard of it. So I think it is really important that we're covering these things as well. And I would say that most founders will not be doing something in this presentation that they should be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And an ICO is a really good one. As soon as you hold any information on any individual, so personally identifiable information, so a name and an email address will do it, you need to register with the ICO. So when you've got shareholders, when you've got employees, when you're capturing customer details, no matter what it is, you need to be registered with the ICO. There's lots of fines and problems that can occur if you're not registered. And it's also just not a good look if you're not getting that admin duck in a row. So absolutely make sure you've done that. And there's probably a few founders going, oh, I'll make a note of that. I should probably catch up and do that. You should also think about insurances at this point. Now, it may be premature if there's just you and your co-founders and you're not trading. You probably don't need any insurances at all. When you employ your first employee, and by the way, directors don't count for this purpose, but when you've got your first employees, you absolutely must have employers and insurance. If you don't, then that's a breach of the law, and that's a really, really bad thing. And you pick up a bunch of other obligations when you have your first employee. You've got to have health and safety staff. You've got to have a workplace pension in place at the time they pass their probation. So there are some kind of key trigger points in your business that will mean you've got to get onto other admin. One of those is, you know, employing somebody. One of those is collecting any data at all. The first time you work with a supplier, and when you start to trade, so when you're formally trading, at some point in the future, you will need to worry about VAT and PAYE registration as well. When you've got a website, you need these three sets of policies. That's just the very basics. Some are a legal obligation, some are just best practice. The first time you work with a customer, you should have T's and C's in order to reduce your liability somewhat with the customers. And then you need to think, you know, at some point you're going to employ somebody. You need to think about how to incentivize employees, advisors, and NEDs. Maybe we'll do a fifth session, Emmy, on exactly this, which is how to, you know, incentivize those employee advisors and NEDs without giving away a whole bunch of shares without any control. So that's all I'm going to talk about on this part. So let's get into, I know somebody's already asked around how you prepare for a funding round.
Oh, just very quickly, NEDs is a non-exec director, Cynthia. So someone who acts as sort of like an advisor on your board. So they're not involved in the day-to-day running of the business, but they are, you know, they're listed. I can't remember, they listed on Companies House.
Yeah, anybody who's a statutory director needs to be listed.
Yeah, so they're listed on Companies House. So, for example, when we ran our media agency, we had an old wise man who'd done this kind of stuff before, and he was our non-exec director. So we paid him a monthly fee and gave him some shares, and he basically advised us on things and actually would run the board meetings and stuff for us. Should we take a few quick questions, Sam, before we go into the next bit? So can you pop your questions in the Q&A, because otherwise they get lost in the chat. Do you need a workplace pension if you're a PAYE employee?
So broadly, you're not obliged to, and this doesn't constitute tax or legal advice, you're not obliged to provide a workplace pension for directors. You are for any other employee once they've passed their probation period. Yes. Okay.
And is my company ineligible for SCIS, EIS because I'm already incorporated?
Broadly, yes. I mean, it's much, much, much easier if you haven't incorporated. If you have already incorporated, that ship has probably sailed for technical reasons. I'm happy to jump on a call and double check, but yeah, almost.
But is it? But you can still get SCIS and EIS from investors. Do you
for
mean
investors?
For yourself?
Yeah, just not for founders. Yeah.
Okay, so Jade, so not for founders, but if you're looking to get investment and you want to get SCIS and EIS investment from founders, it doesn't matter that you're.
You have to have incorporated before you.
You have to incorporate it. So I hope that's clear. And. Someone's asking about whether you'd recommend hiring a broker to introduce them to investors. I think we maybe cover that off later on in the session because it's not related to these this specific part of it. Is it too late to register for SE and SAS if I've already incorporated? That was another person. That question's been answered. Yes, if it's for founder, SEIS and EIS, but not if it's for investors. Somebody's asking, how do you find an advisor? I think that's our next session. Advice on paying fees for any NEDs, that's our next session. Do you have a guidance on what share pool to set aside for? We can come back to that if we have time, by the way. On what share pool to set aside for incentives. Is there like a standard amount?
There is. In the UK, it's 10%. And here's a tip for all founders on the call. Don't listen to this, investors. It's in a founder's interest to push the creation of the option pool further down the line. If you create an option pool when you've just incorporated, and you're the only shareholder, then you are taking the whole pain of that 10% dilution. If you usually it's created after the first or second funding round, the option pool that is, and that shares the dilution across the founding team and the first one or two series of investors. So don't rush to create an option pool. Now, sometimes your investors will push you to, but it's in the founder's interest not to rush to create the option pool early days.
Okay, perfect. And then I think someone's asking, is incorporation the same as setting up a limited company? Yes, it is. That's incorporating a company. And more questions about board advisors. So I think we'll come back to all the board advisories. We could quickly cover it off now, actually. Advice on fees to pay for a non-exec director or amount of equity to give away for their support. There is some template somewhere. What are your thoughts on this, Sam?
Yeah, I think you've got to consider you've got to put all of their remuneration in one bucket. So how much are they going to be? Are you giving them a day rate? Are they just getting equity? What are they doing over what period of time? So all of those things, if they can be fundamentally life-changing to the business, they can make introductions to customers and suppliers you wouldn't have access to, then you will want to heavily incentivize them to do that. If they're just there to sit on your shoulder and make sure you don't make any common mistakes, then they're probably they're still useful, but probably less useful to the business. So you need to throw all of that in the pot. The usual recommendation is no more than 1% for kind of advisors and NEDs, unless they're offering exceptional value. And only give them, don't give them straight shares with no vesting, because you could give somebody 1% of shares today, they could quit tomorrow, they've got 1% of your shares for nothing. So you always have some vesting agreement or issue them options, so that if they don't deliver what they promise, then they don't get the shares. That's one of the common mistakes we see is people being over generous with shares and options and not having that clawback if it doesn't work out as you expect.
So our first business, I don't know. I actually think it was fair. We gave our NED 5%. We didn't have a clue, what was standard. And it was actually very different to now. I think now advisors get much less. And if you're building a mega scaling business, and you give them 1% and you set up 100 million, they make loads of money. But we were building a smaller, bootstrap business. And so the 5% we gave him, and I think we paid him £1,000 a month, was like an absolute steal, because we ended up doing really well. He ended up saving us loads of money. He ended up stopping us from having founder arguments. He would be the sort of sensible parent that would we were only 25 at the time, come along and sort us out and tell us where to put our money so it was safe and all those kind of things. So I think it probably does depend on the type of business, but I know a lot of businesses that are maybe looking to get investment and scale massively, I think it's like you said, more like 1%. Another question is, do you have to register for the ICO before or after incorporating? So as long as you register it after you've incorporated, so you set up the business, you go onto Google ICO, and I think it's like £40 a year or something, and you just do that and do that by direct debit, and then that covers you off, and you just need to ensure you're everything you do is in line with the GDPR guidelines.
Yeah, exactly that. And I don't think you can even register before incorporation. So, and it's as long as you do it, sometimes you'll start a business, it will be dormant for a year, or you're just doing R&D. You don't keep any personal information. As soon as you start capturing names and email addresses or whatever, then that's the time to register for sure.
Yeah, so I think we've covered off a lot of those questions around sort of setting yourself up for success. And I would just say, actually, all those things like the website, the terms and conditions, the privacy policies, you'd be amazed how many people haven't done that. And it's really, really important to get those done correctly. Consultancy agreements, freelancer agreements, all of those.
Agreements, formalize everything, because it's really likely that your investors are going to ask to see lots of that stuff during due diligence. And if they're asking to see, you know, a NED agreement or an employment contract or your ICO registration, and you haven't done it, that's a, you know, that's a really bad look. That's
yeah. Can you change the number of shares in your company once you've registered?
So it's trivial to, if you've created a company with one share, you can file something called an SHO2. We've got a brilliant article on this, and that does a share split. So you can turn 1 into 10, 100, 1,000, 100,000, whatever. If you've got, you know, 50 shares and, you know, you want to issue them to other people, you know, you can create a taxable event at that point. So you need to tread slightly more carefully. But yeah, to do a share split's trivial. It takes an hour, well, it takes 5 minutes, and Companies House process in the same day.
Perfect. So should we crack on?
Yeah, let's crack on. So I will really conscious of time. I'm going to canter through these next 5 slides. These are around the 5 things that you need to prepare in order to get into a funding round. I've covered lots of this in our previous sessions. We'll share the videos later. So the first thing you obviously need, every founder should know what a pitch deck is. I'm not going to spoon feed you this one, but yeah, pitch deck is absolutely issue number 1. You've got to get that in place. It's got to have a certain flow, you know, very standard stuff. Ditto the forecast. You need this for both advanced assurance, SEI, CIS advanced assurance, but you also need it for your investors. There is, at a really early stage, there's a balance here. You don't want to create a, you know, 30, I honestly see some forecast model with 30 tabs along the bottom talking about VAT timing and balance sheets and corp tax timing and all that kind of stuff. Nobody cares. It won't matter. You know, having 5 or 6 sheets showing your workings, your underlying assumptions is perfect. And even that's overkill for HMRC. If you want a minimum viable product forecast model, we've got one on our free stuff on the webpage. The third thing you'll need is the term sheet. The term sheet is a distilled version of your legal terms for the funding round. So funding round paperwork's 100-ish pages. Nobody wants to read that when your investors are first talking to you. So you can squish it down into something called a term sheet. You can get one for free from FounderCatalyst. You can create it in about 10 minutes. I'm not going to cover this anymore, but it is one of the 5 things that you can reasonably expect investors to ask for, and you should have one prepared so you look prepared. Right, the next is around getting SEI, SEIS advanced assurance. We've got a whole hour session, Emmy, on, you know, what SEI, SEIS is and what advanced assurance is. To recap, SEIS and EIS are tax schemes in the UK. If as a founder you are not offering these tax incentive schemes to investors, you are almost uninvestable to angel investors in the UK. Every angel investor, you know, I've got 32 investments, everyone is under one of these schemes. So you should be offering the scheme, and the way to prove that your business is eligible under the scheme is something called advanced assurance. You get that from HMRC. We do that for free when you commit to a funding round. It shouldn't take too long, but it is one of those ticks in the boxes you need. I've added a 5th duck in a row. This wasn't, until recently, this wasn't added to my ducks in a row. But now I think, you know, the more I think about it, the more important I think it is. And certainly, whilst the market is challenging at the moment, the investment market is challenging, you need to be able to justify your valuation. And to tell you what normal looks like in the UK, if you're a pre-seed, pre-revenue, i.e. you may have built something and have an MVP, you've not sold anything for sure, your valuation will be something like £1.5 million, and you should be raising something like £250,000. Those are the average. So pre-seed, pre-revenue, raising at a value of 1.5 million and raising an amount of 250K. That is what normal looks like. If you're deviating massively from either of those figures, or if you're raising much less than 15% or much more than 20%, investors are going to ask. They're going to kick the tires because that looks unusual. We've got a really great article on our website on how to arrive at your valuation and how I, as an investor, do that. Take a look at that article, and hopefully that will be useful as well. So those are the 5 things you need to do to go into a funding round. And then you've got going to market. So how do you approach investors? I've spoken about this at length in one of the other presentations, so I'm not going to do it again. But broadly, within the UK equity market, these are the sources of funding. Everything from approaching mum and dad and your friends all the way through to approaching people that can write multi-billion pound checks. So that's your range here. For me, I think the optimal place to go, here's a tip for the day, is angel networks. That is the Goldilocks area for me. You know, if you're approaching individual angels, there are 200,000 plus in the UK. It's really painful to find them. It's lots of conversations, and you're going to get lots and lots and lots of rejections. If you go past that, then these investors here are more sophisticated and therefore will know how to play the game much better. There'll be lots of fees, and the terms will be pretty punchy usually. So for me, the optimal place to go is an angel network. You get to speak to, 50, 100 angels in one go. You should only have to pitch 2 or 3 times to close your whole of your funding round if everything is sane. So that's my tip of the day, is absolutely go and look at the angel networks. There's about 100 plus angel networks in the UK, and I will post a map at the end of this session where everybody can see each of those groups geographically in the UK. Somebody asked a question, I'll come back to that now, Emmy, on should you use a broker? So I'm not anti-broker at all. I think brokers do form a very solid part of the ecosystem. Brokers, some try charging, give me £3,000 so I start the search for you. I absolutely wouldn't pay that game. I wouldn't pay brokers anything more than a nominal fee to start the process, maybe £200, £500 or whatever to start working with you and do due diligence, and then they will typically take a percentage, 3-5% of your funding round or whatever. So yeah, I think there's a number of brokers I absolutely would recommend that you speak to. So that's how to find your investors. When you get to pitch to investors, and I'm not going to deep dive into this one, but this is how investors will evaluate your startup. There's lots of words on this slide, but every investor will have a slightly different version of this diagram in their head. I mean, for me, to just explain where I go instantly, when I look at a startup, I'm always looking at team. Always, the most important thing is team for me, as well as what does the deal look like? What's the proposition? How defensible is it? Is there any IP? Are there grants? Yada, yada, yada. But for me, I've got to love the team in order for me to consider investing. And you should make sure that your pitch deck is answering all of these questions in one way or another, because every angel investor, like it or not, will be thinking of each of these items. So between your pitch deck, your forecast, and your term sheet, you should be able to answer everything on this diagram. If you can't, then consider adding something to your document as well. So let's talk about how you close a funding round, assuming that last stage has been successful. You've found your investors. How do you then close a funding round? There are 3 ways of closing a funding round in the UK. So if, we're not like America where you can use safes, if everybody's heard those, or options or warrants or convertible loan notes, those all go out the window. None of those are SEIS compatible. There are only 3 ways of closing a funding round in the UK that are SEIS compatible. They are an ASA, or an advanced subscription agreement, a priced round or a normal funding round, an old school funding round, and an agile funding round, which for me is a beautiful and elegant way of closing a funding round. What does a normal funding round look like? So these are the documents that you will expecting a funding round. I'm not going to go through these one by one. A, we don't have time, and B, we did this in our first video, I think, a second video, maybe, Emmy. We'll post a link to that, and we deep dive every one of these documents in detail. But these are the documents you'll need in a funding round, and you will work with a platform like FounderCatalyst to produce these, or you'll work with a lawyer in order to get each of these documents in place. We do see some founders trying to create them from scratch. Don't try that at home. That's bonkers. On to step 6, which you'll be glad to hear is the last step, and then we can dive into the question and answer, which I'm really looking forward to. What do you do post-raise? So you have a bunch of obligations post-raise. First thing you need to do is file a bunch of stuff with Companies House. So you need to file an SHO1, which is notifying Companies House that you've allotted shares. Very straightforward, takes 5 minutes, online form, easy. And you need to file your new articles of association if you've adopted them, because they need to get filed with Companies House. You need to, at some point in the future, you need to file something called an SEIS or EIS1 form with HMRC to notify them about that you've issued SEIS and EIS shares. And you then need to go through a process called SEIS and EIS compliance and certificates. We do that on FounderCatalyst, and we do it for free again. You notify HMRC, and there's a really complex process to go through where you are then at some point authorized to issue SEIS 3 certificates to each of your investors. Sounds ominous and painful, but we take lots of the pain away there. You've then got, you're probably in this diagram here. So at some point you will close maybe a friends and family, or maybe you'll go to your pre-seed round, and you're probably considering your next steps in terms of funding stages. Now that's an overgeneralization actually. Some businesses, they will do one funding round and they're done. They can raise 250K in their first funding round. They can get to the point of profitability and grow organically. That's a really lovely way to, for the founding team to keep 85 to 80% of their business, not dilute any further, and then grow based upon cash flow. Sometimes that's just not possible. Sometimes you need, millions, tens of millions even, in order to achieve your goal. And you need to be considering what those follow-on steps look like. You need to make sure you're not ridiculously over diluting in the process. We do, and I'm not going to explain this sheet, but we do have a free calculator on our website that you can download. It's an Excel spreadsheet where you can model to your heart's content what your funding journey looks like for your specific business. So you can model, how many shares you have in corporation, when you do a family and friends round, if you do a pre-seed round, and what those other funding rounds look like in terms of what your valuation is, how much investment you take on, therefore, how much you're going to get diluted. And you can see over time how much that each of the founders or the founding team own at the end. And this is also worth doing to validate that it makes commercial sense for investors. So if you're taking on a certain amount at a certain valuation at this point, are your investors, are your Series A investors seriously going to get the right kind of return they're looking for through the period? So that's a really, really useful way of modeling if you're going to do more than one or two funding rounds, for sure. And it's worth walking through that process and having a chat. So lots of slides, lots of talking. I'm really keen to have a drink of water and get into any Q&A.
Amazing. I was just getting the links for the Legals for Funding 101, how to secure funding, and there seems to be the other one, which I can't remember what it was off the top of my head. It's not on YouTube, but I think you might have access to that. But anyway, that was a whistle-stop tour of a lot of things. I think, as you said, we do go into depth with a lot of those in some of the other videos. Shall we crack on with questions, because we've got a lot? Okay. So someone's asking, how do we get into an angel network? Maybe just explain what an angel network is and how you get into that.
So how does a founder get into it? I assume that is. So an angel network is a collection of angel investors that invest together. Usually they're geographically based. So quite often you find, there's Angel Investors Bristol, for example. Those guys love invested in local and Southwest businesses. That doesn't mean you can't apply if you're not in Bristol or the Southwest, but it means they've got a kind of affinity for local investments. So lots are based upon geography. Some angel groups are based upon sectors or verticals. So you've got science angel syndicates and green angel syndicates and people like that deep dive into very specific, types of businesses. So it's horses for courses. But yeah, they're groups of, 15, 20, up to a couple of hundred investors, all who invest as a group. I will put in the chat how I would, there's an interactive map of ways to find those investors. Yeah, I think that answers the question.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's great. So can we put the questions in the Q&A, not in the chat? Because obviously the chat will lose them. I think there's a couple of questions going into the chat. So you pop yours in, and Jamie, if you just pop them in the Q&A because we're working through them, that would be great. So let me go back to the Q&A. How should we handle the chicken and egg situation where you need to provide a list of potential investors to get advance assurance? I feel uncomfortable asking for investment from strangers when I don't already have advanced assurance. That's a brilliant question. I feel like we answered that in a previous webinar, but let's share that here today.
We did, and this is, it's such a good question. I'd love to answer it again. So you're absolutely right. Angel investors will rarely spend time with you as a founder unless you've got advanced assurance in place, because there's no guarantee any investment they make is going to get the tax relief. So they could spend loads of time doing due diligence and meeting you for coffee and getting to know you as a founder, only to find that their investment is never going to benefit from the tax release, at which point they're going to walk away anyway. So it feels like a chicken and egg. It's an unsolved, intractable problem, but actually it's really straightforward. On the advanced assurance application, you need to list one or more people who aren't employees of your company, aren't related to you broadly, and are UK taxpayers. So everybody on this call should know somebody who, you know, their next door neighbor or somebody from their gym or their best friend or brothers and sisters are okay. Whatever, you know, you will be able to name somebody who you can say to HMRC, this person is a potential investor, potential being the key word. HMRC, we've never seen HMRC make an inquiry of those individuals to sanity check that they're actually going to invest. So actually, it's a really, really low bar. And it's meant to cut down on the number of foreign companies making SEI, SEIS applications speculatively that never end up, you know, taken on investment. So it's really, really easy to pass that one.
Okay, so the next question is, as a solo female founder, will I be uninvestable as I don't have a team? So I would say I've invested in solo female founders. I don't think it's the fact that you're solo, or for me, it's not about being female. Obviously there is a lot less funding going to women, and that's like a whole other story. Yep. But are you uninvestable as you don't have a team? So I think the thing what you just have to think about is, like, investors want to know that you do have probably a team around you that are going to be able to help you on that journey, and that they have some credibility and some backstory, and the same with you. And therefore you are probably more investable if you do have a team. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Sam. You're an investor as well.
Yeah, I mean, you know, ideally you'll have 3 co-founders, all of whom are exited founders or ex-Google, all of whom with PhDs. But you know, that's what perfect looks like for some investors. Personally, I invest in solo founders as well, as long as they either one of these two things. They either have a strategy for building out their team. You know, how do you find somebody who's going to be CTO even if they're not a co-founder? So how do you solve all of those other key parts of a business? Or, you know, or you may have that team ready to go once you get funding. So, you know, you've got the team lined up, but they haven't quite quit their job because they need funding and a salary to do so. Yeah, I mean, the optimal, as an investor, the optimal team size is probably 2 or 3. But yeah, it's not a deal breaker for me. There will be some investors out there that just won't invest in solo founders. They just won't touch it. But you don't need to impress everybody. I think we labor this point in one of our previous videos. You know, there are a couple of 100,000 investors in the UK. You don't need to impress all of them. You need to impress 10 or 20 or whatever you are required to close your funding round. And there absolutely are. Maybe 50% of investors won't invest in solo founders, but there's plenty left that do.
Exactly. So I think this also comes on this is quite a good follow-up question, that somebody's saying they get the perception that investors are looking for huge returns and potential unicorns. I'd say most investors are. Everyone is looking for return generally. But this founder is saying they've got a solid, steady business model that'd be more like a donkey. Does that limit their chances of getting investment? And should they be pitching to a certain type of investor? Well, VC investors, for example, are looking for at least 100x return. So if you're not, most businesses aren't VC backable. So you definitely wouldn't be looking for VC backing. I think it also depends on the type of business. Like, I don't hear many people investing in service-based businesses because often they can also be bootstrapped. Like, for example, I run a media agency, or all the service-based businesses that I run, we bootstrapped. I don't know. Do you hear of people investing in service-based businesses? I feel like maybe there's less need for investment there. I don't know what your thoughts are, Sam. But yeah. What sort of investor should they be looking for if their business model is solid and steady but slow?
Yeah, I mean, you've already said VCs, you know, unless you can in principle become a unicorn, you know, the market size supports that, then most VCs are out. So, yeah, but VCs, you know, aren't probably a great fit for 99.9% of people on this call. There are angel investors. You know, a normal angel investor is working on a 3 times return on their blended portfolio. That's kind of that's what UK BAA statistics say. We've done some modeling on this. In order to get up to 3 times, you know, you'll have lots of fizzles there. So 7 out of 10 startups will fail within 3 years, or whatever the latest figure is, something like that. So you will need lots with, you know, a 10, 12 times return in order to offset those that just fizzle and die entirely. So as an angel investor, what kind of return will I be looking at? I'll be looking at something like that 12 times minimum return. If you can't show me how I'm going to get to that, then we've probably got a problem. And if you can overachieve that, well, that's great. In terms of services businesses, yeah, most are cash generative and profitable really early on. So it's probably the wrong time to explain it at the end of this video, but the business I grew from 0 to 30 million, we did that bootstrap. So we didn't take on any external investment or debt. We didn't need to. We were cash generative from day one, and we just went on that journey alone. So if you are, quite often you see service-based businesses that have been going for a little bit and they want to add SaaS or AI, or they basically want to automate their solutions, they can take it to a broader market. That's usually a really good reason and rationale for doing a fundraise, and investors will, they'll love the certainty that you've already got paying customers and you're trying to reach a broader market in a more cost-effective way by automation. I think that's a really good fit.
Amazing. So what are articles of association?
So the two big documents in a funding round are your shareholder agreement, which is the legal document between, it's a legally binding contract between founders, companies, shareholders, and investors. The articles of association are the other, as kind of the other really big document, usually 45 pages. And that is essentially the rule book for how your business is run. It explains how shares are issued and redeemed and removed, and what happens, founder share vesting and things like that, and also how your board's managed. So how's voting managed, how are directors appointed and removed, what to do with conflicted directors and things like that. So when you incorporate a business in the UK, everybody by default gets something called model articles, which are default articles of association that no investor will invest in. They will expect you to replace the articles of association, the model articles, with articles of association that are a much better fit for a funding round. And that's one of the things that we produce off our platform. We produce that 40-page, all of those documents, but that 40-page document that defines, as a founder, where your shares vest and things like that.
Amazing. So like when you set them up, you just get the standard articles of association. So like when I set up Female Founders Rise, that just came with the standard.
Yeah.
And actually I've changed those to put my B Corp intention in there, but essentially probably most people haven't changed them.
Yeah.
And wouldn't do unless they're getting outside investors or growing. Where can we find this calculator? What's the calculator about, Sam?
Yeah, so I think that was one of the last slides I showed, which is showing that the cap table modeling tool. So I will put a link in the chat, he says quickly. This is the spreadsheet where you can plug in your numbers, so how much you're taking on in investment, what valuation, and you can see how your cap table changes over time. You can see what percentage you're left with and whether you're comfortable being diluted to that extent. And you can also sanity check that the returns your investors are getting make any sense at all.
Brilliant. The next question is around SEIS and EIS. So 250K is the limit for SEIS, Seed Enterprise Investment Scheme.
Yeah.
Is it worth asking for more than 250K so you can apply for EIS as well as SEIS?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So our standard guidance to our customers is to, even if they don't need more than 250, say they're raising 260 for the purpose of their advance assurance application. This allows them to get the 250 under SEIS plus 10 under EIS. So the advance assurance proves that you can get SEIS, EIS. Yeah, we would always suggest that, even if you don't need any more than 250.
Amazing. So someone's saying, for some reason, this all goes above my head. Yes, this is a lot to take in, especially if you are early stage in your business. I feel like this needs to be explained to me simply. I, for example, understand cap tables because it was explained to me with the analogy of pizza. Question, yes. Can your company do this and make us feel confident with the answer? So I would say Sam from FounderCatalyst is one of the best people in the market. We only have the best people doing masterclasses, sponsoring us, partnering with us at Female Founders Rise. So I would 100% recommend him. I also know there's lots of people on this call that already work with him and recommend it. So what I would say is, it is very confusing, all this business stuff. There's a huge amount to learn. There's a huge amount that people don't know. What I would say is I would actually, we'll send this through to everyone, but I would go back and watch this all again. I'd also go and look at that link that Sam's put in, which is from Unicycle to Unicorn, and have a look at the FounderCatalyst blog. We will share the recording, and we'll also share the links to the other sessions we've done. So some of those slides that we went over quite quickly, we've actually done like a whole hour-long masterclasses. So rewatch this one, rewatch the other 2 or 3 that we've done, and essentially those go into a lot more deeper information. And Sam does assist. I think as part of the process of work that you do help a bit with the valuation, don't you? And we've also got a masterclass on that as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'm putting some links. Sorry, I realized I was just sending links to you, Emmy, which is probably
don't worry. Yeah, exactly. So what I was just say is, don't worry if this feels overwhelming, because there's been a huge amount of information here, and most people don't have a clue what SEIS is or EIS is. Some people on this call might, because they might have been on another call, but SEIS and EIS is a scheme that allows, in the UK, investors to invest in your business and get a tax, it's very tax efficient for them. So therefore, if you get, if you enlist your business as part of this scheme, it makes it easier for you to get investment, because it's tax efficient for investors. So for example, when I'm investing, I would want to invest in a business that has SEIS or EIS, because it's tax efficient for me and I get some of my money back. So I think the other thing with these early stage founder journeys, we use a lot of acronyms like SEIS, EIS, VC. VC is venture capital. It's kind of like a different kind of funding to angel investing. And if you're new to this, obviously it would massively go over your head. I mean, there's a lot to learn. So hopefully,
if I could add, Emmy, just very quickly. So we've got I've just added the last link there, is Unicycle to Unicorn. That is basically a written version of today. So and it's got lots and lots of links. We've got a glossary of terms on our website, and so the whole aim of that page is to walk you through exactly the journey we've covered today in mind-numbing detail, with links if you want to deep dive on any topics. But yeah, just to try and distill away the key messages here.
Yeah, we'll post the map to the Angel Network. You don't have to pay for a private consultation with Sam, because you get access to him when you sign up to use his service at FounderCatalyst, and I think you do take calls before then anyway. So Sam shared that map, which shows you the angel investors, the angel investor networks. Also, just be aware that angel investors and investors like venture capital funds and angel investor networks all have different thesis, and a thesis means like what they want to invest in. So I only invest in female founders, and I'm not investing at the moment, but I only invest in female founders. So lots of angels, lots of networks, they all have their own thesis. They might only invest in B2B tech, or I'm part of an angel network, and in order to be even, for a founder to even be, looked at, they have to be seen to be able to do 100x. They have to have a tech founder or co-founder. They have to have a lead investor. So like, you wouldn't get through the criteria to even be seen without ticking those boxes. And everybody's different. So, there might be someone else like Hermessa, they only invest in female founders and they invest in particular types of businesses. And other VCs might only invest in B2C, consumer goods. So it's really important that you do that bit of work and due diligence beforehand, and don't just say, oh, no one's interested in investing in me. If you're sending decks and emails to people that's not their thesis, you won't even get an answer. If a guy emails me and says they want to invest in me, I just ignore it and think you haven't even done any research as to who I invest in. So hopefully that helps. So let's carry on. What is your take on companies taking on loans as opposed to equity? I speak from the bitterest of experiences, having had a lead investor call in a 100k loan with 48 hours notice, having promised to not treat it for 6 months at least. I ended up losing the business because of this, and my wife and I had a business 41.5% of her value at 11.1 million. So I don't know, that sounds like you're taking on a loan from a lead investor? Is that a normal thing to do, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, loans are a totally separate topic, obviously. So my take on loans, so lots of loans come with something called personal guarantees. So if the business can't pay you the loan, you personally can. If you can't pay it, then you get bankrupt and people take your house. That seems a ridiculous risk, considering that 7 out of 10 businesses fail, blah, blah, blah. I would absolutely not gamble on that. If you can get a loan without a personal guarantee, then make sure it's not, it can't be redeemed or called in, or because that can create, unexpected cash flow problems. So, yeah, I mean, I think everybody looks at debt solutions in the UK. They're like, I want to keep 100% of equity. I'm going to borrow money, and then you see, yeah, the terms and conditions attached to borrowing money, and they go, yeah, actually, I'm going to sell some equity because it's much more straightforward. And the other thing that taking on debt doesn't do, it's not making use of your superpower. Your superpower in the UK is SEIS and EIS, and debt, doesn't come anywhere near that. So yeah, for me personally, I would never touch debt as a founder. Yeah, horses for courses. Some businesses, if you're up at, if you've got a couple of million in revenue and you've got assets you can borrow against, or you can do invoice factoring, then sometimes it makes sense. But for very early stage, pre-seed, pre-revenue, that's virtually always a really bad option.
Okay. I think we've got another 15 minutes max, so let's rattle through these questions. Do you have any strong recommendations for a broker? I think that you probably want to take that off.
Yeah, reach out, drop me a message.
Yeah,
I'm happy to make some intros.
Drop Sam a message. You assist with the company evaluation as part of your service? I think you do help with that, so we've answered that. If you're looking for co-founder, should you be incorporated already to protect yourself, or should you build to a certain stage together, then incorporate together? Personally, I would always incorporate myself. But you might have other thoughts, Sam. I don't know. I've set up businesses with, I think it depends. Is that co-founder going to be 50-50, 50 split shareholding and everything else? Or is it like your idea and you're looking for someone to come and support you? I have had some interesting experiences where I ended up having to close down a business because of some mistakes I made around that. So I'm always kind of quite erring on the side of caution, I suppose.
Yeah, I think, and there's some people rush to incorporate, and then, that can cause its own problems. I think I would only, if I had an idea in my own head that I was considering, creating into a business, there's no rush to incorporate until you need to start, funding or whatever. So I wouldn't rush to incorporate. When you're taking on a founder and they are kind of a co-founder at the point of incorporation, that's the optimal time to give a co-founder shares. Anytime you do it afterwards can be less optimal than that from a tax point of view. So yeah, I don't think I'd necessarily rush to incorporate, though. Take on board your point, Emmy. If it's really easy to incorporate with a co-founder, it doesn't work out and they own 50% of your shares and they've wandered off. So you need to, there are ways of mitigating for that. A founder collaboration agreement we spoke about, vesting shares and those kind of things. I don't think there's one size fit all. I mean, if I can tell you my story at FounderCatalyst, I knew whom I wanted my co-founders to be. We've got an amazing CTO and chief legal officer and salesperson. So we spent 6 months planning and building software. We didn't bother incorporating. And then at some point we went, we suppose we better pick a name and incorporate. So we did it further down the line. What we wanted to do is, start getting on the journey, check we can work together and things like that before we formally incorporated. That worked really, really well for us. But obviously you can't even think about going for funding until you're formally incorporated. Yeah,
exactly. So someone was asking, is there a map of all funders, accelerator programs and other startup support? Well, I don't think there is, but Female Founders Rise has got loads. We send stuff out every week. FounderCatalyst probably got stuff on their site. I think there's so much change all the time. I mean, in terms of funders, there's like millions of VCs and angels and probably loads of some out of date, some in date spreadsheets somewhere. We'll have to try and locate those. But things like accelerator programs as well, they seem to change so rapidly, and there's always new ones, and also very varied in how good they are. So we have heard that a lot of accelerator programs are a total waste of time, and that there are some really good ones out there. And I think if you're going to thinking about doing an accelerator program, I would definitely do some research around what you get, what you give away, and the value that you get from those by talking to other people who've done them. Would you ever use seeders or a crowdfunding platform to raise money?
Yeah, I think they've got a place in the ecosystem. I think, the crowdfunding investors are different from normal angels. Typically, they'll be, they're called retail investors, and they're typically less sophisticated. Not being rude about them, that's an overgeneralization probably. And there are some things that do ridiculously well on crowdfunding. So, if you're, a kind of consumer brand, something like a gin or some funky socks or something, something like that, that a layperson in the street go, oh, that looks new and interesting. That's really good. Brewdog's the standard example that's done ridiculously well on crowdfunding. If you're a deep tech doing something in AI or quantum or whatever, it's a really, really, really bad fit. So horses for courses, it depends on your business. I mean, crowdfunders, there's a few things you need to know. They're relatively expensive because their fees are relatively high, but also there's lots of prep you need to take in advance. So you've got to do really polished videos and stuff like that, and that comes with a cost. And secondly, crowdfunders, you've got to take, if you're raising 200K or whatever, you've got to take 70% of that to the crowdfunders before you start a campaign. So actually, you're doing 3/4 of your round before you even get on the crowdfunding. So it's absolutely not a perfect fit for all businesses, that's for sure.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so we did an event 2 days ago with sustainability founders, and there was 2 founders on there of sustainability businesses. One was Ocean Bottle and one was Stripe and Stare, who create the world's most sustainable, comfiest knickers or something like that. And they both had very successful crowdfunding rounds, and that's because obviously, they probably got quite a lot of it's an easy thing, isn't it, to get behind,
Yep.
Ocean Bottles, where you're like, it's a product that everyone wants, and you can probably get your customers to like, I know Stripe and Stare, they've got a huge number of customers, and a lot of their customers who love their knickers ended up investing in them. I think Nicola, who did it, I think she closed like 700K or something recently on a crowdfunding platform, but very much would depend on the type of business. Any tips for looking for investors in a saturated market like jewelry? I would say something like jewelry is going to be pretty hard to get investors in. I don't know what your thoughts are, but when we sort of talked earlier, investors are probably looking, an angel investor is probably looking for what, I don't know, 4, 5, 10 times their investment in order to look at the risk. And obviously then we said like the VCs 100x. So you've got to think like, how is your business going to deliver that return for investors? And because if you can't show that, and then it will just be very difficult to get investors. What do you think about that, Sam?
So, I mean, I see thousands of pitch decks a year. What's really interesting, and there are some fads that come in and out. You get, over after Corona, the number of mental well-being apps and hyper-local food delivery, it was just crazy, the number of those businesses. In all of my time, I can't think, probably there has been some, I can't think of a single pitch deck I've seen in the jewelry space. So, I mean, it may be, very competitive in the sale market, but in the equity market, I've never seen it. Now, maybe that's probably because it's not a ridiculously well-fundable model, but I don't see any reason why it's not like any other. Yeah. I mean, there's no reason it's not unfundable. Like Emily says, you need to make sure your forecast stacks up. You need to, how are you going to go to market? How are you going to differentiate? Why now? Bring those things to life on why you're going to be a success compared with all of the other jewelry providers. But it's not, I mean, from an investor point of view, I can't think I've ever seen a single jewelry pitch deck. So it's not that competitive.
No, I think I might have seen 1 or 2, but I'd say generally it's not like a mega scalable business for a lot of people. So it's probably not one for investors, unless you're doing something that can scale. So where you are a pre-revenue startup, this is a SaaS business, what things can you promote as achievements to look more compelling to investors?
Yeah, so I mean, this comes back to traction, and traction is it's a spectrum from, you've got a bright idea, you've just incorporated, you have done absolutely nothing other than produce a pitch deck, through to, you've got a scaling business with, you need to pour money into marketing to throw thousands or millions of customers at your platform. Having developed something, so some IP, some code, having a team around you, having customers that have signed up for a beta or are on a waiting list, proving that suppliers and partners want to work with you. There are lots of things. I love a roadmap slide is my favorite slide in every pitch deck. If a pitch deck doesn't include it, then I cry a little inside. But a roadmap showing, like you are here in the middle, but what have you done to date? And virtually every company's done something. If you've genuinely done nothing at all other than incorporate, it's really, getting funded just with a bright idea is really, really hard at the moment. 2 years ago, it was pretty straightforward. Now it's absolutely not. But as long as you can paint a traction around having a team, if you've patented something, great. If you've got a PhD in the subject, great. If some IP or something you have done, that's every little piece of momentum you have, traction towards that kind of launch point is absolutely brilliant.
Perfect. Does SEIS Advanced Assurance have an annual expiry date?
No. So the Advanced Assurance is it doesn't expire on itself. So you could have advanced assurance from 10 years ago and it won't have expired because it doesn't, unless your business is no longer compatible with the scheme. So as long as you haven't been trading for more than 3 years, and as long as you meet all the gross asset tests, as long as you've not raised more than 250 and then yeah, it doesn't expire as long as you remain compatible with those schemes. So yeah, not at all.
So one of your founders who's registered with you hasn't started their funding round yet, but they're putting together their pitch deck. Do you need a pitch deck in place before starting the funding round and getting advanced assurance for SEIS?
Yes. Or you need something to provide to HMRC that brings to life your business. There's 2 ways of doing it. There's a business plan and a pitch deck. I hate submitting business plans to HMRC because some grumpy HMRC inspector's got to read 50 pages of your brain dump and they're not going to thank you for that. And there are lots of things you can say wrong in 50 pages, whereas a 12-page pitch deck that says this is what we do, this is how we make money, this is what we're spending the money on, this is how we raise, and bringing to life, HMRC have 6 tests they're looking at ish. Are you a qualifying trade? How are you going to use the money? As long as you can bring to life those things on a pitch deck, which you can easily in 12 pages, that's perfect. If anybody needs to produce a pitch deck just to get through the HMRC process, there's a site called pitch.space. For 100 quid, they'll produce a PowerPoint that you can, it's a wizard where you enter a bunch of stuff. It will spit out a PowerPoint that is perfectly adequate for HMRC as long as you don't misstep. So yeah, it's much easier. I always suggest founders submit a slide deck, a pitch deck, rather than the business plan for sure.
That's brilliant. I didn't know about pitch.space.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So everyone's saying this is very helpful. That's so nice. We do like to hear it's helpful. Put your questions in the Q&A. We can't put them in. We get lost if they're in the chat. So let me just have a look what the question is. Sorry, I was just trying to read the chat and the questions. So all the masterclass videos, we did put them in the chat. We'll send them again. If you go to Female Founders Rise YouTube, you will find them on there. So that will be the previous masterclass videos that we did. We will share them again. Someone's asking which angel network I'm in. I'm in an angel network called Ventures Together. That's the one that only invests in tech-led founders of tech-led businesses where there is an actual tech founder in the business and they've got a lead investor and they're going to do 100x. So that's one of the networks that I'm part of. I'm actually not investing at the moment because I spent all my money on most of it. Can SEIS be used just once or can we use it every tax year?
So you can keep using it as long as you are still qualifying. So you could raise 100,000 today, 100,000 next year, and the 50 the year after, as long as you remain within all of the parameters of the scheme. So as long as you're within 3 years of trading, you're below the asset test, below the number of employees, and you've not raised more than 250 minus any de minimis state aid. So yeah, it's not like you need to close 250 this year and then you're done. You can raise 100, whatever.
But also just say you can't, once you've done your 250, you've raised 250 grand in total, then you go on to EIS.
Then it's done. Then you're on to EIS for sure. Yeah.
Wouldn't it be nice if you could do it every tax year? That would be nice.
That would be lovely.
If someone owns the US and UK IP of a brand, should I sell the IP to the company for investment or license it? I don't want to lose my IP, but it holds value if the brand is successful.
This is a tough one. I mean, investors, this is not anything to do with HMRC or whatever, but this is an investor point of view. Investors want your business to own the IP. There are really horrible scenarios where founders have walked away with IP that's fundamental to the business, and the business just can't operate once one of the founders walks away. So as standard, we build you something called an IP assignment document that that assigns each founder's IP into the company. Now, you can exclude specific things there, but it sticks out like a sore thumb. If you're worried about this is actually a use of multiple companies, having said at the start, never create more than one company, I'm about to conflict with that. If you've got IP you want to protect, so the problem with having IP in a startup is if the startup doesn't work out and you need to throw it into administration or liquidation, the IP automatically goes to the administrator or liquidator to sell on the open market or whatever. In that case, what you can do is create a parent company, a trading company, and an IP company. The trading company will typically be the one where, if you go into liquidation, you just throw that company away, that company destroyed, and the IP is still held in a separate legal entity. That's what we've done with FounderCatalyst, for example. So that's a nice way of the IP being held in one of your companies, but not being subject to that risk. And all of your investors, by nature of the rules of SEIS, EIS, have to be investing in Topco. So they always invest in the ultimate top company. So they get comfort, they get the best of both worlds. You get to protect your IP. They get, the IP is owned by a business that they've got shares in. So that's a nice way of solving all of those problems, I think.
Amazing. So it looks like we've got to the end of the questions. We've done it all in our hour and extra 15 minutes. Share with us in the chat. We've still got 50 people here. What was the biggest takeaway from today? What did you learn? We would love to know. Pop that in the chat, please. And also, I just wanted to get some feedback. We always like to ask, get feedback from all of our sessions at Female Founders Rise. How helpful was this masterclass for you today? How much did you feel you learned? Anna's saying, thanks, such a good tip. Pop in the chat what you got out of today. We'd love to know what was your biggest learning? What did you not know you needed to do? What are you going to do differently, or what are you going to take away from today? Obviously, Sam gives up his time, and we love hosting these, but we just like to know that we're actually delivering value. Oh, brilliant. So Phoebe sorting out ICO SAP, that's brilliant. Most people probably need to do that. I reckon a lot of people are going to be going to check out ICO and data protection and all the legals around funding. 100,000. Oh, yeah, pitch space. Exactly. That's a good one. So relieved to know I can submit a pitch deck instead of a business plan to HMRC. Exactly, Suki. And you can use that pitch dot space that Sam suggested. Getting focus on SEIS and angels for your donkey. Okay, brilliant. I would say also with angels, definitely look at finding people that are passionate about your space. It'd be much easier getting people involved. Board advisor agreements. Yes, that's a great one to do. I don't know if you said you got those on FounderCatalyst. Have you, Sam? Have you got board advisor agreements?
So right now we've got some templates that you can download for free and use. We're our very next product that our CTO is busy hammering the keyboard on. Hi, Andy. Is around unapproved, like EMI and unapproved option schemes, and these are more formal ways of running option schemes for both employees and advisors and NEDs. So that's coming out very soon. But right now we've got a bunch of templates that allow you to give people or sell people shares subject to vesting, to make sure that if somebody takes the shares and walks away the next day, they're not keeping all of those shares.
So lots of people are saying they didn't know about the founder investing through SEIS and EIS. I didn't know about that either before you told me in the last one. So that's always good to know about getting clarity on the duration and validity of SEIS and EIS IP management. That's also great. Slides, I think connect with Sam if you want the slides. I'm sure he would love to connect with you on LinkedIn. Sam, do you want to put your LinkedIn in the chat?
For sure.
Also, I'll put my LinkedIn in the chat. I reckon I'm probably connected with most people on this call. I feel like I'm connected with most people in Female Founders Rise, but you never know, do you? So you've had a really good really good feedback from today. Everyone has had a lot of value from this. We always do get a huge amount of value. I think one of the things that's really good about you, Sam, I'm sure there's more than one, is that you can make kind of quite boring topics more fun and more interesting and also simple to understand. Because I think, like someone was saying, all this stuff can become very confusing. It can go over our heads. And I think also lots of people are using acronyms and words, like even ICO, which stands for the Information Commissioning Officer. Most people wouldn't know what that means. So sorting out ICO and data protection, getting clarity on what ducks I need to put in a row to get investments. Brilliant, exactly. Templates, lots of info I didn't need to know about. Great. So it sounds like everyone's had a good value impactful lunchtime today, and I want to say thank you, Sam, for being part of this. It's been really nice to see everybody here, and it's been really great to have you host a session again. And yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. And thanks everyone for taking the time to come as well. It's always good to see founders spending time getting their business sorted out. And you know, it just doing the work up front is such a good idea. Doing the legal work up front. I have to just very quickly share something. Like, I just trademarked Female Founders Rise recently. Over the moon to have done that, because I found that people are potentially organizing events using my brand name, which is kind of, maybe it was a mistake, maybe it wasn't. Either way, I was like, thank goodness I've done that. So doing these pieces of work, getting everything set up for success now is so worth it. And I think a lot of people either don't know or don't realize how important it is to do all these things. Have you got anything to share as a final word, Sam?
No, it's just always a pleasure to present with you, Emmy, and yeah, great to see your community. And I'm looking forward to seeing a picture of your ice bath on LinkedIn pretty soon. Sounds terrifying.
Exactly. I'm just wondering if it's going to be me with all the kids, like my 4 children and me and my husband in an ice bath. I don't know, or if it's going to be me.
Good luck getting the kids in it.
They're desperate to get in. They're
Really?
desperate. I promise them they can have ice lollies in the ice bath when they get home. Have a great day, everyone, and thanks again, Sam.
Thanks,
Take
everybody.
care.
Pleasure.
Bye.
Bye-bye.